The three children stood silently beneath the bright morning sky, their tiny hands clutching a bouquet of freshly picked wildflowers. The old cemetery was peaceful, filled with the songs of birds and the gentle rustling of green trees. Yet the silence around one small grave carried a sadness far heavier than the sunshine could erase. Every year on this same day, the poor triplets came to visit the only person who had ever loved them without condition. They whispered stories to the stone because it was the closest thing they had left to hearing their mother's heartbeat again. But this year, before they could finish placing the flowers beside her grave, a convoy of black luxury cars slowly rolled through the cemetery gates. Men in expensive suits stepped out first, scanning the area carefully. Then a silver-haired billionaire emerged, staring at the name carved into the headstone as if the entire world had suddenly stopped. Tears filled his eyes before he whispered words that would change the children's lives forever. "She was my wife." Before we continue this unforgettable story, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to Kindness Hub if you believe in second chances, compassion, and the power of hope. The triplets had never known luxury. They barely remembered warmth. Their names were Rowan, Selah, and Micah, 12-year-old siblings who had spent most of their lives fighting against hunger, loneliness, and uncertainty. After their mother, Mireya, passed away from a sudden illness 3 years earlier, they had been moved from one temporary shelter to another before finally finding a small apartment owned by an elderly woman named Mrs. Corwin. The kind widow charged almost no rent because she saw something extraordinary in the children. They worked after school delivering groceries, collecting recyclable bottles, and helping neighbors with chores simply to keep food on the table. Every dollar mattered. Every meal was earned. Despite the hardships, their mother had left them one priceless inheritance. She had taught them never to hate the world, even when the world seemed determined to forget them. She believed kindness always returned, though sometimes it took years to find its way home. Every birthday, every holiday, every important moment, the children visited her grave during the daytime carrying fresh flowers instead of expensive bouquets because their mother used to say flowers picked with love lasted longer in the heart than flowers bought with money. That peaceful tradition was interrupted forever when the billionaire appeared. His name was Alistair Voss, one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the country. Newspapers often described him as a business genius who built an international shipping empire from almost nothing. Yet none of those headlines captured the emptiness behind his success. For more than 15 years, Alistair had quietly searched for the woman he once loved. He believed she had abandoned him without explanation after a terrible misunderstanding arranged by powerful people who feared their marriage would threaten family fortunes and business alliances. Every investigator he hired reached the same heartbreaking conclusion. She had vanished. Now he was staring at her gravestone. The children watched nervously as the elegant stranger knelt before the stone. His expensive suit became dusty against the earth, but he did not seem to notice. His trembling fingers gently touched Mireya's engraved name while tears rolled freely down his face. Even his security team lowered their heads in respectful silence. Rowan finally gathered enough courage to ask who he was. Alistair looked toward the three frightened faces. Something inside him froze. Their eyes looked exactly like Mireya's. Their smiles, though hidden beneath sadness, carried the same gentle warmth he remembered from years ago. Even the way they stood protectively beside one another reminded him of promises he had once made to the woman he loved. He slowly explained that many years earlier he and Mireya had secretly married before powerful relatives forced them apart through lies and manipulation. He believed she had chosen to leave him. She believed he had betrayed her. Neither knew the truth. By the time he discovered the deception years later, she had disappeared completely. The children listened in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about their mother suddenly felt incomplete. Alistair carefully removed an old leather wallet from his pocket. Inside was a faded wedding photograph. Although time had worn away the colors, there was no mistake. Their mother stood smiling beside a much younger Alistair, both wearing simple wedding clothes and glowing with happiness. Selah covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. Micah stared at the picture without blinking. Rowan could barely breathe, For years they had believed their father was unknown because their mother had refused to speak about him. Now they were looking at proof that she had once lived a completely different life. Alistair admitted he had no idea the children even existed. The realization crushed him that if they were 12 years old, then Mireia had already been carrying them when she disappeared. That meant he had unknowingly spent over a decade searching for his family while they struggled through poverty only a few hundred miles away. Guilt settled over him like an unbearable weight that he asked permission to visit the grave alone for a few minutes. The children quietly stepped back beneath a nearby tree while he remained kneeling in front of the stone. No one heard his words, but everyone saw the tears. After nearly half an hour, he returned with swollen eyes and a quiet determination that had replaced his grief. He offered to help the children in any way they would allow. He did not ask them to trust him immediately. He understood trust had to be earned. The triplets politely thanked him but declined his invitation to move into his mansion. Years of disappointment had taught them to be cautious. Mrs. Corwin had always warned them that promises were easy while genuine love required patience. Alistair respected their decision. Instead of insisting, he began visiting them every weekend. He fixed broken furniture in their tiny apartment with his own hands. He attended school performances without cameras or reporters. He quietly paid overdue utility bills without expecting recognition. When Rowan's shoes fell apart during soccer practice, a new pair appeared anonymously outside the apartment door. When Selah dreamed of becoming a nurse but worried about tuition, scholarship somehow found her. When Micah developed a passion for drawing, high-quality art supplies arrived wrapped in plain brown paper with no signature. The children slowly realized every unexpected blessing carried the same invisible source. Months passed. The billionaire who once negotiated billion-dollar contracts now spent afternoons helping with homework, cooking simple dinners, planting flowers outside the apartment, and listening to stories about school. He never tried replacing their mother's memory. Instead, he encouraged them to tell stories about her. Each memory became another piece of the life he had lost. Mrs. Corwin watched everything carefully. At first she distrusted wealthy people because too many had ignored suffering, but Alistair never treated kindness as charity. He treated it as responsibility. One rainy afternoon she finally invited him inside for tea. She handed him an old wooden box Mireia had left before her death. "I think she wanted you to have this if you were ever found," the elderly woman whispered. Inside the box were dozens of handwritten letters. None had ever been mailed. Each one was addressed to Alistair. The first letters were filled with hope. She believed one day they would reunite. Later letters described raising triplets alone after believing he had abandoned her. She never wrote with bitterness, only sadness. In the final letter she confessed she had recently learned the truth. She discovered he had searched for her for years. She forgave him completely. She prayed he would someday meet the children. By the time Alistair reached the final page, tears had soaked every letter. He understood that fate had stolen years from them but had not destroyed love itself. Determined to honor Mireia's memory, Alistair established a charitable foundation in her name focused on helping single parents struggling to raise children alone. He funded free medical clinics because illness had taken Mireia too soon. He built scholarship programs for children living in poverty. He renovated shelters where families could stay together instead of being separated. Every project carried one simple message engraved near the entrance: no family should lose hope because they lack money. News reporters praised his generosity, but he refused interviews. He always answered the same question with the same response: "This isn't about redemption. It's about keeping a promise I should have fulfilled years ago." The triplets eventually agreed to spend weekends at his home. The mansion felt intimidating at first. Huge rooms echoed with silence, luxury surrounded them, yet it felt strangely empty. Together they transformed it into something different. Micah filled the walls with colorful paintings. Selah planted gardens that reminded everyone of their mother. Rowan organized neighborhood soccer games across the enormous lawn so local children could enjoy the space. The mansion finally sounded like a home. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Mireia's passing, the four of them returned to the cemetery together during another bright sunny morning. This time they carried hundreds of flowers donated by families whose lives had been changed through the foundation. The once-forgotten grave became surrounded by love. Alistair quietly thanked Mireia for never allowing bitterness to consume her heart. The children thanked her for teaching them compassion even when life seemed unfair. Standing together beneath the warm daylight, they realized family was not built only through blood or wealth. It was built through forgiveness, patience, sacrifice, and choosing love every single day. If this story has touched your heart so far, please type, "Kindness Still Lives," in the comments below. Your words may inspire someone who desperately needs hope today. As they prepared to leave, a little girl approached the grave carrying a single daisy. She explained that her mother had received life-saving treatment from the Mireya Foundation. Without those doctors, she would have lost the only parent she had. She gently placed the flower beside the others before running back to her family. No one spoke for several moments. They didn't need to. The greatest tribute to Mireya was no longer written on stone. It was living inside countless families who now had another chance because one woman's kindness continued changing lives long after she was gone. Before this story ends, if it moved your heart, please like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Hub. Every act of support helps us bring more stories of hope, compassion, and second chances to people around the world. The triplets looked one final time at their mother's grave before walking away beside the man who had finally found his family. They had lost many years that could never be returned, but they refused to let grief write the ending of their story. Instead, they chose forgiveness over anger, hope over despair, and love over regret. And as the sunlight poured across the peaceful cemetery, it seemed almost as though Mireya herself was smiling, knowing that the family she had prayed would someday be reunited had finally found one another, not through wealth, but through the enduring power of kindness, truth, and unconditional love.